bring back to the show to share with you his wisdom and expertise. And I'm talking about Martin Lampman, who is Director of Customer Support Operations for BCLC. Martin is an executive leader creating and fostering great teams to achieve positive results, leading large teams across the private and public sectors. Martin has consistently created highly engaged and motivated cultures. Being a purpose-driven leader, he has been leading the way in helping others find their own purpose. Martin, it's a pleasure to have you back. You have great stories and great insights into culture, business, and digital transformations. Very much looking forward to it. On behalf of our global audience, thank you for taking the time to be here with us today.
Jose, thank you so much. It's great to be back. It's always great to see you. The last time we met, you were just as exciting and as full of energy as you always are. So it's great to have a chance to connect with you again. And for everyone out there, good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are. It's great to hear from you and talk to you, hopefully through this next half hour or so, as I get this lovely chance, this great privilege to sit in front of you and talk to you about culture and what culture is. Jose said it in the beginning, I'm calling in from Kamloops, British Columbia, out here in Canada, which is a beautiful day today, and it's a great day to start a little presentation to talk about great things like culture. I work for a company that's called British Columbia Lottery Corporation, or BCLC, a great organization. I was so happy to come here 9 years ago to start the next leg of my journey in my career. It's a great organization. We conduct and manage the gaming across the province of British Columbia, and I think one of the greatest things that we do as an organization is the monies and the revenues that we create go back into the government to help fund things like school and things like, today, healthcare, which is so important, and educational centers across the province. So it's nice to know that an organization you work for does such great money and takes money and puts it back to the good of the communities that we live in and that we work in. So, and I think nothing was better to talk about, and a nice connection to that is culture. And I think culture is one of the key things that makes organizations work. It really helps people stay connected. And I think as people connect more and more in a culture and in an organization, then performance goes up. And also, I think that people find a lot more excitement and thrilling opportunities that happen within the organization when cultures are working at their top priority. So today I want to talk to you a little about culture and what that is. I'm probably going to say that word a lot, but it's more about how do you find it, because I think a lot of people I think we understand what culture is, and we've heard people talk about it, and we know it's a lot about groups of people and the patterns and how people work and how they interact with each other, and we talk about it. But I think there's a lot of things when it comes to culture. People say, oh yeah, this company's got a great culture or bad culture, but the one thing that people never try to do is really understand what it is. And today I want to walk you through how I've been able to achieve that within this organization, but also how I've done it within other organizations to get a deeper understanding of what really makes people work well and work well together, and also how do they find joy in how they're working every day. One thing about, I said a little bit in the beginning, is culture. The funny thing about culture is people say, when I work in an organization, man, that culture is just absolutely horrible. You wouldn't believe how bad it was. Or I go to another organization, oh man, it was so great. And no matter if it's a great culture or a bad culture, I think one thing always remains consistent is you. You are a part of the culture. And when cultures are bad or cultures are good, you have an act and an opportunity within that culture to change it. And if you are a leader or you are someone who's within a group, you have the opportunity to really stand up and really make change and help people see and view these opportunities differently, but also have an opportunity to bring people together and work more as a connected group and as a collaborative team to really help drive the results that you want to. A lot of people believe culture is top down. It's like, what does the CEO set the culture as? And really, it's semi-true, but really what it comes down to is culture lives and breathes no matter how executives and CEOs change. I read a statistic that said the average CEO lasts about 4 to 5 years. A VP is about 7 to 8 years. So those people are always changing, but there's a lot of people that are within the main core of the team that never change. And they're the heart and the soul of culture and really makes it work. And that's where it happens. That's where you want to do the work, because that's where you really want to put your focus and energy and time into. I also find it really interesting as we do business cases or we do ideas and suggestions, and we spend about 95% of our time trying to convince 5% of the organization that it's a great idea. when we used to spend 95% of our time trying to get the rest of the organization to think it's a great idea, because they're the ones that are going to help motivate it, and those are the ones that are going to help push it forward. So today, or the last couple of years, as you've probably seen it, the struggle is real. A lot of things have changed in our culture, and how do we continue to charge forward? Remote work has been a challenge for a lot of teams. It's also been an eye-opening experience as we've gone through it, and how do we change ourselves to work in this new environment that's here to stay? Also, when it comes to that type of environment, we're starting to miss a lot of the diverse perspectives. A lot of different people are bringing different perspectives, different ideas, and we spend more time focused on the way we thought it used to be. And also in the old archaic system of organizations and business, we think old school on how that should happen. Well, we're not bringing in people from the front and people from different levels of leadership to come in and talk about how it means for them, especially when they bring such unique and diverse perspectives. We're also entering a stage of disengagement, and burnout is on the rise. People talk about burnout and they figure, oh, I'll go for a 2-week vacation and come back and I'll be just great. But what you don't understand is burnout is so much higher than just taking a break and going for a vacation. Because what you find when you come back is you're just as burnt out as the moment that you left. So being able to understand the quadrants of burnout, and the part that really helps to bring that to life is how connected people are, and also how much they're staying in connection with those that are around them, and feeling that value and that excitement and productivity in what they're trying to accomplish. And it's getting harder and harder to find talent. It's on the move. There are people moving around, and when your culture is, you're trying to build one and you're bringing new people in, you're losing people, and there's a lot of the tenure people that are leaving your organization. That's a lot of heart and soul of your organization that was there before that are not there anymore. So how do you balance that? How do you continue to understand how your culture is changing, and that tidal ebb and flow, and how that's actually evolving for you, and how that's evolving within your organization? And finally, I guess the question is, are we moving now to more of a disconnection than a connection in our worlds and our organizations? We're more connected with technology, we're more connected in social, we're more connected with everything that's going on, but are we actually standing at a point that we're becoming more disconnected with each people that are close to us? You may be connected to someone who's 1,000 miles away, but the person who sits right next to you, you're starting to become more and more disconnected to them because you're more focused on what's happening outside of it. So our workforce, just like everything is changing in our world, our workforce is changing. Mental health and well-being continues to be top of mind. It's one of the key things that executives are focused on these days. It's also as an organization. I know our organization is highly focused towards mental health and that well-being of how people are doing, and the workload and the capacity, and how do we make that balance to make sure that we can give people the excitement, the energy of what they're trying to achieve and do, but also balance out that we don't overwork our people and what they're doing. And there's an expectation of radical flexibility today, where we were 2 years ago or 3 years ago, where people would, hop in their cars and drive into the office like I did this morning. People don't want that. People are looking more towards that flexibility in how they work and how they achieve their day-to-day activities. And plus, there's a balance of life. There's home care, there's care for your children, there's care for your parents, there's all these things that are balancing, and you're trying to make those things work for you, and you need to have that flexibility in how you work. And the access to information continues to, people are wanting more and more. They want it to drive more insights to make things happen faster for them, where we're more of keepers and gatekeepers of information and performance. Now people want this and they thrive for it. So how do we give them that insight? How do we make them part of the solution to continue to evolve them, so that the process is always inclusive, and also they're feeling like the value that they're bringing every day is actually leading to something, and providing those insights helps them achieve that. And finally, the employee experience, it's the leading trend now. We're all talking customer experience for years and years, and now we've moved into this whole employee experience part. And how do we make sure that the journey an employee takes from the minute they walk in the building, or the minute they start their day, to the end of the day, or even the course over a year, what's that journey like, and how does an employee go through that, and what's the ebbs and flows of what that means? Jose talked a little bit about how I've been driving purpose a lot and finding people in their personal purpose. As an organization like BCLC, we're really pushing for our social purpose. And what does that mean for communities that we support? And what does that mean for how we support the economy, the social status, the environmental pieces, and all those? but people want also purpose. They want to work for organizations that have purpose, and they want to buy from organizations who are really social purpose driven. What we're finding is 42% of the workforce in the recent study is starting to show that they want to work with an organization that has a positive effect and impact on the world, especially now with climate change being such a big topic and such a big thing that's happening. You look at the west coast of the US and what's happening down there with the fires, and you look at the floods, things are changing. So people want to make sure they're with an organization that's having a positive impact and not causing a detriment to the world. As the workforce is changing, you'll probably see it. I'm not a millennial, I'm a Generation X. But millennials in the workforce, you stand and take a look around you when they're all in the office, you're starting to see that is changing. I remember I used to be the person who looked at the baby boomer and went, oh my good Lord, that person just does not move. Now I get to be the older person, which is unfortunate to say the least. But 62% of millennials now want to work for a company that has that positive impact on the world and has a positive impact on the community that they live in. So you're starting to see that change a lot. And you're starting to see consumer trends are starting to change. 2 in 3 consumers will pay more for a company that has that positive social impact. So people want purpose. How does that work? And how do you start to build that into an organization? But also, how do your people start to see that when it's another piece that's impacting your community and also your culture? I call it the building of your house. I've done other sessions before that talks about different segments that actually start to build and frame up your house. And culture plays a key part within your house. Values, experience, and strategy, all key segments of it, and also the purpose and the earth that you live on. But culture is such a key factor in trying to understand that. And what I found is that as you've started to go into and understand culture more and more, you really start to unearth a lot of the goodness that happens and a lot of the goodness that's making things happen within the organization. I've had the great opportunity and privilege to run sites within North America, even in the US and in Canada. I've had sites in Canada and the US at the same time. And I found that even though on the outside, they seemed a lot different, once you got to the heart of what they were and how they worked, you got to see a lot more about the goodness that they have and also the sense of community that was within them, and how they got great things done. Even though there might be their bad sides, they had a lot of goodness within them. And I found the same thing when I came here. There's just some great people doing some great work, and I just love people who are just up for the challenge. And these teams continue to surprise me each and every day. So what I wanted to talk to you about, now that's all your headwinds. So you got a lot of headwinds against you as an organization and a lot of headwinds against your culture. And a lot of people say, well, what do I do, Martin? I don't understand my next step. My culture just seems bad, but I'm not really sure. So what I want to take this opportunity today was just walk you through just a simple culture process that really is about conversation and how you bring people together to have conversation, to start to unearth some of this goodness, and then the steps you can take after that. And really it starts with just understanding and identifying what is your culture. Have the conversation to start to unearth this and understand what it is, and start to put letters and words to exactly what that means for each and every one. The next part is, how do you communicate and promote that? How do you get people to understand what the culture is, but also what does it mean to them? For those that aren't engaged in the process, how do you make sure that they understand that? And how do you make sure that afterwards people know when they come in the organization what the culture is? And how do you continue to evolve this? Because as I showed you in the beginning, it's always changing. Remote work today is a lot different than remote work 3 years ago. And what we're seeing in the generational gap and people coming on board and the changing of workforce, how do you continue to evolve this so it doesn't become stale and just becomes just a word, just a topic that people just spit off the top of their tongue, which has no meaning behind it. And throughout the entire process, how do you make sure it's an inclusive process? So people are bringing in their perspectives, their ideas, and their thoughts, their feelings, and how does that shape and form the way that the culture works and the way that the culture can move forward? So through the simple culture process, what I do is I take people on a journey. I take them on a simple journey that really helps them open up and think about things at different levels. And really what I like to start the journey off is just aspiring. So when you sit in your organization and you look at other ones, you're like, oh my good Lord, I wish I could just go work for that organization over there. Starbucks seems to be a great organization. They seem to do really well within the social purpose space on how they're doing that. They seem to do really well on their onboarding and training, but you're looking at other organizations thinking that they're great, so it gives you good perspective for your team to think about what's so great about that organization you see over there. What inspires you to be like them? And how it gives you kind of that view to say, how do I start to look at that and bring that in here? Then from a community standpoint, you look at yourself and you look at your teams. How do your teams work together and how do you bring that back? The next part is individualism. So we wanted to talk about the individual. What does that look like? How does that impact the individual? And how does that start to build the picture to get us up the mountaintop? And really at the end, how do you actualize and how do you put it into words exactly what all this means so that you can take it out and promote it and actually people can see it and go, that's exactly what our culture is. So aspiring, when we talk about aspiring, like I said, it's how do you bring and look at different organizations that we can relate to. There's organizations out there that we love to be part of for one thing or another. It's not that you want to jump to the grass is always green on their side, but there's things that they do that you're just like, man, I wish I could do that. I wish we had that here. Maybe you do have it until you start talking about it and unearthing it within the group session. It's you don't know. So it's a good chance to take that opportunity to see it. And for admiration, like what makes you admire them? What could you take that's from an admiration standpoint that you could hone and have internally? Or maybe it's something that you admire them for, but you actually don't see it's happening internally within your own team as well. So it gives you a chance to see that. And what makes you believe in them? For other organizations, like you have this belief that Zappos is the best company ever. They ship shoes to me in like 3 hours. They could be the best company, and the team seems to work so well together. So, but why do I believe in them that they can make a difference, that they have that? And also, why do we have this jealousy? They have this jealousy for them over there. Like, what's making you look that way? Because what that does is really resonates with someone when they say, why do I keep looking to them? Why don't I look internally to say, how can I make them jealous of me? We spend too much time trying to be like, want to be like that other company, but we spend less time trying to get them to be jealous to be like you in your company, in your organization. So it's always great to make other people jealous of you. It's not a bad spot to be sitting in. So the next part of the conversation, so we've got everybody in a group session, and you're talking to this, so you want to start to unearth the community aspect of it. So reflecting on your current team, when you look at that, how do you currently work together? How does the team work and how do they connect and how do they interact with each other today? How can you take that and start to build on top of that? Is that something that's similar across all the different teams that you're talking with that was within your session? Where do you find the most joy? Where is your team being the most successful? Because what you want to start unearthing is, as we connect and as we collaborate, what are some of the things that we're really starting to see that we do really well? Is collaboration the key to our success? Is it the sense of support and dedication to each other? Is it the joy we find in the levels of production we do and the amount of things that we do or widgets we produce? Where do we get the most joy as a team, and where do we celebrate each other's success? And where has always been those keys that makes our team so successful? Is it because of those parts of it, or is it just that Tom is such a great guy because he can come in and rally us and get us excited to do it? Well, if it's a cheerleader you need, maybe the cheerleader aspect is part of what really makes your team successful in the future. And we'd be at a loss if we didn't talk about the individual. We've talked about our team, we've talked about the organization, and we look at that as a holistic part, but we need to really ground ourselves in the individual. And because everybody is different and everybody likes to work differently. So in the words of Marie Kondo, or in the words of Ikigai, it's what brings you joy. Where do you get lost in the flow? Where is that part that as an individual you can come to work and you're like, my God, I love doing this because it gets me such excitement, and I get lost in that conversation and that collaboration aspect of doing something. And it really brings me that joy. Where do I and how do I love to work? I might love to work at home through video stream because that's where I get most of my enjoyment, and I got to try to find a way to make this connection work somehow and really stay connected. Or I might love to work in teams, collaborative sessions with a group of 5 sitting in a session. Or I might love to work, I'm more analytically minded, so I like to work, you give me all the data stuff, I'll take care of that. You go out and do all the fluffy stuff that's all about presentations. You take care of that. I love doing this. So together, how can we really complement each other to really show that collaborative aspect? And in the end, where do I feel most alive? Where do I get the most joy out of what I do and how I do it? And where does that really resonate with me? When it gets me up in the morning and I get excited to go to work, or I get up in the morning and excited to start my day, how does that happen? And where does that actually make me, motivates me to take it to the next level? So once you've had a chance to really go through all of these, it might sound like a lot of talk, but what you start to really unearth are commonalities and words that remain consistent across all of the teams. The last session I did was with 70 or 80 people across the organization within the team's division. And even though division is a bad word to say, the larger team, we'll call it, when we did it with the 80 people, what we really started to see is commonalities within them. And as they started to talk more and more, it was so eye-opening to watch that conversation take place and watch the light bulbs go off in all of them as they started to see what that could actually look like and how much goodness was actually happening within the team. And you could watch them come alive just from having the act of that conversation and having that dialogue between them. So actualization, this is part of a sneak peek of what they actually came up with the last session that we did and how they came up with the 3 C's of the community, of the culture that they have, and they're able to build statements around what that culture looks like and what that means to them. It's a nice, when the organization is values-based and also is purpose-based, these are such beautiful complements to those things. Remember, I showed you the house of business and how that works. They complement so nicely when you have values like integrity and how these connect with those values as an organization. When you have values like diversity and inclusion, well, connection and collaboration community are all about that. So there's great synergy across all of them and all the different dynamics that there are. So now that you have all this, you've gotten to the point, you're like, my God, we actually identify what our culture is. We have a good understanding of it. We've built some statements around it. The people are just jazzed about it. So do I just put it in a binder and stick it on a shelf and then that's the end of it? Or how do I take this out now and make this a reality? So what we've been able to do is by taking things like that, we are able to build web pages about culture and what culture is. We're able to take out and do commercials for our recruiting teams and go out and talk about what our team's about and how we're connected and how we're compassionate and what our culture is like, so that when people are applying for a job, they automatically know the type of culture they're going to come in and work in. For the support center, we did one around culture and experience. So when you come to work, I can tell you before you even put the application in, the experience you're going to have when you come work for us and the culture you're going to come and work with. As I talked about in the beginning, where people want to work and where they want to go, it really gives people that transparency to see where am I coming and what am I going to start doing. As an organization, we've done that as a larger swath across all of our recruiting pieces of it. They talk a lot in the recruiting aspects of it on how the organization works and the values base that we have and the type of company you're going to come and work for. I think that the more transparent we are as an organization and we push that out, it's really got us some great top talent that keeps and continues to come in. And we've also been able to take it within team orientation videos. So as people come on and they're onboarded, we actually can take a different spin on it and help show them more about what our culture is about and also the experience that they're going to have. So they get to see it again within the training program that they're in. So it really helps to keep that connected as well as link it up to our values and how it shows that. The other part is how do you do the continuous improvement? How do you make sure that this continues to happen? So the new thing that we started was actually a community of practice when it comes to culture. Each of the teams, it's a large, vast group, and they're all in different groups. We have marketing teams, we have support center teams, we have player health, we have stakeholder engagement and community. There's so many different teams that we have today. So how do you keep them all connected? Because there's lots of pockets of goodness that is happening within the teams, and how do you bring that back together so they can collaborate and talk about it? So we built a fun page within one of our interwebs where people can go on and talk about who they are. These are 4 of the members that make up our current team. I think there's 8 or 10 in total. But it gives a little bit more humility to them, but also gives a little more life to about what they are. And they sit and meet, I think they meet every 2 months right now, and talk about some of the initiatives that they're doing to help drive culture within them, and some of the things they're doing to help bring people together. When we talk about collaboration or we talk about community, how do they continue to come together as a community and talk about those things? And it's a great exercise for them to be able to do it. and it's shown some positive results. We did an engagement survey last year, which is such a great opportunity for us to pull some goodness out of them. But we saw some really positive results in segments of our engagement survey in the last year as we started to roll this out. So we're starting to see positive impacts of the effort that we're doing. So when we talk about results, what does that look like? There's so much, there's qualitative and there's quantitative pieces of it. Some things you just can't put a number on. When you have an opportunity to bring people together, for 2 years, people have been hired on, and they've been hired on without actually even stepping foot inside a building, and not even sitting with a team. So having a chance to bring people together, like I said, the session I did was with 70 or 80 people. The more you bring them together where they are pushed to interact and talk with each other, it really starts to open up the door of who they are and who they are within the team and the organization. So it brings this whole community aspect. As I talked about the engagement survey, we saw great lifts in our teamwork and collaboration, in our diversity and inclusion and belonging, and also in our psychological safety, which was a great result that we saw as we talk about mental health in the beginning being such a core piece of it. We're seeing more people being able to have that conversation with each other, having friends at work, but also being able to have that conversation with their leaders. And the community of practice, like I said, has just built such a great connection and an opportunity to share across the teams. It's proven to be a really effective opportunity for them to do it. Also, the vice president of our team, he is the sponsor of it. So he'll meet with them every quarter and sit down and talk about them, how the progress is going. So Peter's been such a great advocate of culture and how culture is grown and makes it happen. So it's great that he's given us the space and time to help develop this with him, but also being able to have the teams to come together and take the time to have this conversation. The other part, engagement surveys are an annual process, so it's once a year. It's a long time to wait. What we've found really effective, we did this through COVID, and what we were able to unearth is a lot of studies that were done, particularly over in the UK and in Europe, that really spoke on 3 things. One of them was around engagement and the questions that you ask people, and we put people on a scale to talk about how they were doing. And the questions seem weird at times, but it also gives you an understanding of how people are doing within the workspace, but also how they're doing in the mental and social space outside of work. And showing that part of where they feel excited to start their day, and are they part of a larger team, and do they feel like they're making a difference from an engagement aspect of it. From an inclusion standpoint, do they feel like they have great friendships? Do they feel like they have enough people that they feel comfortable talking to? And also, do they have great relationships that they're satisfied with and that's working well for them? And from a connection standpoint, do they feel connected? Do they have friends that they connect with daily at work, and do they communicate regularly with their leaders? What we found through these survey aspects of it, we did it through quarterly updates over the course of 2 years, and found really positive results coming out of it, because what it did is it pushed us as leaders to get better in these segments, because we knew that these were core things of our people that made them work better. It pushed us to look at the technology solutions that we have and how do we bring people together. It pushed our leaders to say, we need to have more than just an annual meeting. We need to start pushing more to monthly meetings or quarterly meetings to bring people together. We need to push more to just having a conversation and a focus group with people that isn't focused on work, but it's more focused on how they're doing as people and how do we bring them together to have that conversation. And saw great results from that, and saw positive trends from that as well. So pulse surveys, engagement surveys, great ways to tell that you're doing the right things. So in the overall, from a cultural standpoint, I think those are really good segments that you can pull together to really understand what your culture is and measure it to make sure that it's being effective. One thing I'd like to close out with, because we've been talking about culture, which, you know, this is truly about that. It's truly about culture and how people come together. I pulled part of this from a fellow, his name escapes me today. I saw him present so many years ago, and what he showed resonated so well with me that I've just taken it and just, how do we continue to share this? Because I think there's core pieces that really resonate with people, and I hope it resonates with you as well as it does with me. Because as we go through, it's we try to connect with each other individually, but we get lost sometimes in the work that we're doing and how we're doing it. And so many times you just feel like days go by that you're like, I wish someone would just see what I'm doing. Does anybody see what I do? And there's three statements that are the most powerful statements that really resonated with me, and the more I've done these sessions with other people, it resonates the same with them. And the three statements are: you are seen, you are worthy, and you matter. The three most powerful statements you can tell anybody at any time of the day, and it will have a major impact on them. Because if they know for a moment that what they're doing matters and that they matter, it means a lot to them. Because so many days go by that it feels like it doesn't seem like that's happening, and they just need someone to tell them that. Or even the fact that they're seen. You're seen and you're heard for what you're doing. And how do you do that? There's three core functions, or three core pieces that you can really take that help heighten that and bring the awareness to that. One of them is using conflict as an opportunity for awakening. So what do I mean by that? So many times you've had conversations, you've tried to roll out new things within your teams or within your organization, and you've always got those people that want to stand up and they want to be up there and be the voice and really take the charge and put that flag and say, this is not fair. And they're always the loudest within the team. And through the years, I've had many people like this. And what this does is opens up the opportunity to have the conversation about why do they feel that way? What is going on that's making them feel that way? The last one, the one that comes to mind recently is one, she was like that. She felt like she was coming in and she was saying things that people wanted to hear, and she was taking the charge for other people. But when you sat down and talked to her about it, what she was not understanding is that what she was coming and talking a lot about was not really helping others. It was actually pushing people away from her. And what she thought she was doing the right thing, actually she wasn't. She was actually going on the wrong side of it. And to have that conversation really brought to light the impact she was having on others. And really, it wasn't the other people that were struggling with it. It was only her struggling with it. And she just needed to understand it more. And what we had through that conversation is I also found out was the more I brought her in as the process would go along, it made it more inclusive for her to be part of that conversation. It found out that that whole part about having to do those things started to disappear because she felt like she was being heard and being seen through that conversation, and she could actually be part of the process to fix that. The next is create a culture of joyful accountability. There's so many times that we go through. I spoke about Marie Kondo at the beginning. I don't know if you've ever read a book about her. She's one of the people that like to go in and clean your house, keep the things that bring you joy, get rid of the things that don't. That's what joyful accountability is all about. So many times you sat down and have this list of things you needed to do over the course of the year, and at the end of the year, that list of things didn't shrink; it only grew. And so many things that you're like, I need to do this. This is a priority. And 3 years later, it still isn't done. So guess what? It's not really a priority if it's been going on that long. So taking that opportunity to really clean your house, because what you find is that the more you build up and add things on, the more stress and anxiety it's putting on you. It's also putting on the people that are around you. Years ago, I brought my team in because we were falling into that trap. We were building this huge list of the things that we needed to get done. So I brought the leaders in and had a delete and keep session where they got to get rid of a lot of the stuff, and we had really heartful conversations about what they wanted to keep and what they wanted to get rid of. And in the end, we reduced the list by like 2/3, got rid of a whole bunch of stuff of things that we were never going to do anyways. It just sounded really cool, and maybe one day we will, but you know what, if we've been talking about it for 3 years, that time's passed. We can't do it anymore. It doesn't mean the same thing it did 3 years ago. So it's time to move on, to start to look at different adventures. And I think the last part is open your heart. This universe is always changing. The world is always changing. I talked a little bit about it in the beginning, where the world, how people view and come to work and how they want massive flexibility. It's how does that happen? How do we make those changes? And how do we not get so wrapped up in the world that's going around us that fills us with such anxiety and rage at times that we need to be able to open up and really have conversations about how we're feeling. I talked a little bit too in the beginning about mental health. It plays such an important role today, and how you can, by having conversation, you start to see that you're not the only one struggling from it, but you're also having the opportunity to air out what is happening with you and how that's impacting you and affecting you. Too many times I've seen myself go through, and you go for a walk out in the park at lunchtime, and you find out halfway through your walk that your arms are clenched and your fingers are clenched so tight that you look down and you've actually dug your fingernails into the palms of your hands because you're thinking about work and so many things that are going on. When you just take a minute to stop and breathe and think about your impact and think about that, really, does it mean that much? And is it really that stressful that you can just take a step back, have a breath, and realize that things will work itself out. You just need to have the time and energy and space to just let those things happen and find someone to talk to who can help you through that. Thank you. Thank you so much, as Calvin and Hobbes says.
Outstanding, Martin. What a great coverage of cultural transformation. I'm going to ask you to stop showing the presentation screen so that the audience can see you big on the screen. No, not your camera. Stop the presentation, yeah, and click that on the interface to stop showing screen, and then I'll come on once you do that.
Yeah, should be done now.
Maybe you pause. There's a button there that pauses it. You may have paused because I still see your screen. So it's the one next to the pause button.
There it is. Sorry.
You got it. No,
I'm not in IT.
That's right. Hey, listen. What great coverage. We have a number of themes that came up and some interesting questions. So I'm gonna start with our audience questions here. First one comes from Karen Zanetti, and Karen is asking, what did you use to take the post survey? What metrics in that on that post survey are core, and how did you establish them?
Good question. So for our survey tool, we used a application called Qualtrics. They do employee and pulse surveying, so we're able to utilize theirs. For the core metrics, the three that I talked about, that connection and inclusion and engagement, and those quadrants in there, we consider those core functional pieces for us to understand, to make sure people are staying connected and people are staying engaged in the work that's happening. So we use those as our core focuses and make sure we can see positive movements in those ones.
Excellent, very well. Another very good question that I thought came up during your session was assessing culture from outside. And curious, it's not something that you targeted in your presentation, but I'm curious about your insights. If you're on the outside looking in, let's say that you are going through an interview process for a new potential job in a new organization, do you have any tips on how people can assess culture from outside looking in? How would you, for example, maybe know that there's some things going on at BCLC that are interesting in the culture development there is good, and maybe there's a healthy culture? Any thoughts or insights on how can I gauge culture from outside? Because as you mentioned, there's a honeymoon period with any new new opportunity or organization. But when you pass that, it's like any other organization. Organizations are filled with problems and dysfunctionalities, and so how do you get a bit of a gauge? Maybe any tips that you may have from outside?
Yeah, so that's a great question. When I actually came to BCLC, I took the time to understand a little more, to understand what their culture is like. Because British Columbia Lottery Corporation is a crown corporation, so it's a part of the government. So right then it gives you shivers, because you're like, oh my God, it's a government job, nothing happens, nothing moves, right? And everybody must have been here like 90 years. So what I did before I even came over was I took the time, one, to understand some of the things that were happening within the news. Was it coming up? Look at any of the news reports that were going on. The other part was see if there's any things that are getting accolades for within the social space and in the community. So what I found is that BCLC was one of the top named employers within British Columbia. I'm like, okay, check mark. That's a good thing, because they don't give that away to anybody. Seeing if there's any awards or recognition for organization where they're seeing that. Another great one is I used also friends that I have within the LinkedIn space and within the social space to see how they are and how what their perspectives and thoughts were for the organization that they work for, or any interactions that they have. And another really interesting one is finding the organizations and their space within Instagram and Twitter, WhatsApp, any of the conversation space they're taking place, and see how the customer's perspective of the organization is. If they're constantly complaining and there's massive complaints and how they're not getting resolutions and there's dissatisfaction, even if they produce their experience scoring or net promoter scoring, that's actually a good one too, because you can see what the customer's view of the organization is. Because if they're performing really low, chances are that the culture inside is not the greatest. Because when you have high performing cultures and ones that really are hitting the mark, those experience scoring or net promoter scores or those are through the roof, because what they're so excited to do, it transcends out into the business world. So if you look at those quadrants, you get a pretty good idea of exactly what's happening.
Those are great insights, great tips on how to gauge culture from outside. Thank you for that. Another question and theme that has come up is about deciding what a good culture even is. Because there is always a culture or multiple layers of culture in any organization, and we're either intentional about designing it or it just evolves naturally. And once it evolves naturally, people say it could become a monster over time and eat you up. There's even great quotes from Drucker that culture eats strategy for breakfast, and your initiative is just a side dish in the jaws of culture. So the comment is, and the question is, how do you even define what a good culture is, and you design and implement that? What is that process of deciding what good looks like?
Yeah, so as the culture exercises that I've led and gone through, Jose, is what I find is through the conversation, the team just starts to have that conversation about what a good culture looks like and what makes them work most effectively. Because as I talked about in the beginning, you can't push and say what culture is from the top down. You're going to work in an environment that's collaborative. Well, no, I'm not, because I hate it here. Nobody wants to talk to me anyways. So you can't push it from the top. The more that it bubbles to the team, that they can actually see that and have the conversation about what a good culture looks like, they're going to decide. Like you said, they're going to eat it up, and that's what it is. Taking them to the next step to show how that culture starts to link to the values of the organization, start to show how the culture that they've described links to a positive outcome within the strategy and how the strategy is performing, or the mission of the organization. And also, if you're a social purpose organization, showing how they link together. I talked a little bit in the beginning, it's the connection. If people see how they all connect and how they form, then they'll decide and they'll help formulate what that good culture looks like. And how do you know when you've reached greatness or reached goodness? Through the surveying capability, you start to see that when you're sitting in conversations and people are having honest and open dialogue within themselves and having that. If you sit in a meeting and you see 3/4 of the people updating their Facebook status or messaging other friends and they're side chatting, that's not a collaborative culture. And you'll start to see it and start to feel it more amongst the teams as they're working. So I find it's hard to tell them what it's supposed to look like. You want to make it inclusive, so they come up with. You have to lead them on that journey to help them understand that and understand the journey that they're taking and where they're going with it.
I absolutely love that approach that you're taking, by the way, because it's a bit contrarian. And I like that, because I think that's more sustainable. Because as you said, you're very in your presentation, you're very, in my opinion, generous by saying that the average CEO spends like 5, 6, 7 years. The latest research, it depends on the group you're looking at. In the United States, the average CEO tenure is about 3 years. If you look at very large groups, this may change depending on the size of the company. But having said that, that CEO is going to change, the leadership is going to change, rotate, and a lot of people in the middle stay for a long time. The point being that, so you're talking about a culture being driven from the bottom up or from the middle out, which is really interesting. A lot of people say, most of the thought is that, you got to start at the top because the senior leadership casts the big shadow of behaviors in the organization. You need to do that. So I actually really like your approach, and I think sustainable. But the question and challenge that I have for you based on the audience questions is the following. If we are doing it from the bottom or from the middle out, it's undeniable that there is a big impact from the very senior leaders in the organizations and their behaviors on that culture. So the question is, how do you keep them accountable for the behaviors that the organization thinks we should exhibit? And how do you keep them aligned in terms of communication and accountability of those behaviors if it's not starting with them?
Mm-hmm. So now you want me to get the secret to them. So how do you manage the up people? So so what I've found is there's a lot to be said in sponsorship. So I talked a little bit in the beginning. What we did for the culture aspect of it is I got the leadership jazzed about what we were doing and talked to them about the goodness that will come from it. And I engaged them from sponsoring it but also playing a role in it. So what the outcomes were, that they would go, that's actually really cool, because I got them as excited about the outcomes as the team who developed the outcomes, because they were sponsoring it. So I played this sales guy of trying to get the husband and wife to agree that the car they want to buy is a good car. So I was trying to get them to really agree on both sides of it. That was the greatest step for us to take. And then through the sponsorship of having the leadership, things like a community of practice. The executive leader is the sponsor of it. So he or she is hearing from key people within the team who are coming up with all this goodness. And every quarter they'll come back and say, here's what we discovered. Here's some things that we're doing. And he's like, this is the greatest thing ever. I love this. This is going to pull the best result that we can get. And what it shows him or her is that through the sponsorship and what the team is doing, the performance is going up, the engagement's climbing up, people are happy, and there's less people leaving. So it's a push and pull, but it's less about being directive. And also, I know executives like to be heard as much as people on the front line. So it gives everybody a voice in an inclusive process. So kind of like levels the playing field in the whole hierarchy. And you have a really good dialogue and a conversation around it. And that's where also one of the values that I've really loved about our organization, one of the behaviors that helps support the values is radical candor. And one that we've really adopted. And radical candor doesn't mean you get to be an a-hole. It means you get to just speak, just have a conversation about it. I think what you're saying is complete BS. Like, that is not true. And people are open to accepting that, which is a great behavior that people can take and make part of as they have these conversations.
Outstanding. Martin, what a masterclass on practical cultural transformation. I love the contrarian approach from the bottom up and the middle out, because people often feel so much out of control and just kind of expecting that I'm going to delegate culture to senior leaders. And what you have talked about here is a real implementation on how it works on a different way. And appreciate that. In behalf of our global audience, thank you so much for taking the time, sharing your wisdom and expertise with all of us today.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Martin Lampman directly from British Columbia in Canada, sharing his wisdom and expertise with all of us. Terrific presentation on cultural transformation being driven from the bottom up, from the middle out, not necessarily from the top down. Great insights, great practical perspectives for all of us. We're going to be taking a break now, and when we come back, we're going to have a great enduring leader, a cross-industry leader for cultural transformation. And I'm talking about Tiffany Olson, who's a board member at Castle Biosciences. She's going to be talking to us about profit through cultural transformation. Profit and purpose are inextricably linked. And how do we link that in healthy cultural transformations? So we're going to talk about that. And again, if you have additional questions, you want to connect with our speakers directly, you want to thank our sponsors, thank our speakers, please go into the LinkedIn under my name on Jose Perez on LinkedIn, and you're going to see there is a post in there on Cultural Transformation Live. You have access on that post to all the LinkedIn connections to our speakers, and you can make comments or just thank and share and like the posting as an appreciation for every one of them taking the time to be here with us and sharing their wisdom and expertise with us. So we'll take a break now. I'll see you back with Tiffany Olson at the top of the hour.